hopefully you've had a chance to look at the stuff I've uploaded onto Moodle. If not, here's a bit of an explanation as to the way I attack this unit plan. Now, I looked at civics and citizenships under the Victorian curriculum, and in particular the substrand of government and democracy, and I've aimed this at year 7 and 8 students. Because I've prepared it for year 7 and 8 students, it comprises of 12 50-minute lessons, and I'm assuming that there'll be 2 lessons each week, so it'll go for a total of 6 weeks. Now, I haven't done a refresher of my grade 5 and 6 stuff. I think that might take away with some of the stuff that we'll do throughout the unit. I've got the first 11 lessons are I guess the unit content. The lesson number 12 is a revision, and then I'll get the kids to do a bit of an assessment on Kahoot to see how well they've progressed throughout the year. Now, in terms of my unit plan, I haven't put a lot of detail into that on the basis that this is a unit plan, whereas most of the detail will be contained in the lesson plans that would get done for each lesson. I've tried to include a number of activities throughout the unit. This is to accommodate the learning styles of different students and to engage those who may be a little bit disinterested in this particular topic. So some of the activities I've included are class discussions, group work, individual research, role play, some concept maps, watching some YouTube clips or similar. I've even asked a guest speaker to come in and have a bit of a chat to one of our sessions. In terms of assessments, I've got a few different ones there. I've got some exit passes, I've got a couple of worksheets, I've got a homework that I've set in lesson 7 and they need to bring that by lesson 10. I've got a plus minus interesting worksheet. I've got a couple of informal group presentations, a creative assessment, and then a revision test using Kahoot. Now, in terms of my unit plan, the first subject is about the Australian Constitution, and in that we'd be looking at why it was created, when it was created, who created it, etc., etc. Also show a video in there just to reinforce what we've discussed, and then I'd have an exit pass on the way out of the room about it. In terms of my second lesson, whatever you want to call it, still looking at the Constitution, but now we're looking at some of the key features. So, for example, the separation of powers, the role of the executive. One of the learning activities I'll be doing there is getting a concept map drawn up. That would also include some of the information from lesson 1. And then from that concept map, the assessment would be to commence worksheet 1. Now, in terms of lesson 3, we're still looking at the Australian Constitution, still looking at the key features. This time we're looking at the role of the Houses of Parliament. Again, with our activity, it would be, I guess, a bit of class discussion and also adding to the concept map from lesson 2. The assessment would be finalising worksheet 1. Lesson 4, still looking at the Constitution. The key features now would be the different levels of government. Again, activity would be to add stuff to the concept map. I've also got a video for the kids to look at just to reinforce what we've been speaking about. And then a couple of little tasks there in terms of looking at the division of powers and how state and federal governments disperse education funding. Then I'll be getting a bit of a think, pair, share activity where the kids get together and try and think of other funding matters that combination of both the state and federal. Now, the assessment task for that would be just to confirm some dates relating to the school funding and how that's changed over the years. Lesson 5, we're moving on to the Australian's democracy. A bit of a refresher there of what democracy actually means. In in terms of this activity here, the kids would be getting into some small groups so they could conduct some research for their assessment task, which is to design a poster detailing the freedoms available to Australian citizens. I've asked them to include some images that are relevant to each freedom, and this is to be conducted over lesson 5 and 6. Lesson 6, still talking about democracy, but we're talking about the bounds of law and dissent in democracy. Following the discussions regarding this, we'll be moving on to the creative assessment and finalising that off. In terms of my lesson 7, we're looking at the citizens and how they can participate in democracy in Australia. Got a bit of a video there just as an introduction to the topic. We'd ask a few questions about that afterwards. And then I guess the key one is voting. So I found a bit of a template on the AEC website where you can actually demonstrate how the voting system from a federal perspective. Now, see, I've got an assessment task in week 10, in lesson 7 that relates to lesson 10. So I've asked the kids to look for news articles over the 2-week period so we can do a task in lesson 10. Lesson 8, we're looking at the effectiveness of the different types of participation. I'll be getting the kids to work individually and research the different forms of participation, and then I'll be getting them to, as the assessment, complete a worksheet number 2. Lesson 9, we're still looking at citizens and Australia's democracy. Be looking at how your elected representative can advocate on your behalf. So that main learning activity, I'll be getting a special guest in, particularly a state or federal member of parliament, to have a chat to the class about what they do in terms of advocating for their constituents. Even do a Q&A session and try and get the kids to ask relevant questions in terms of what happens if a member of parliament doesn't actually agree with what the citizen's proposing or querying. So the assessment at the end of that task would just be a plus-minus interesting, just to see what they thought about the guest speaker and what they had to say. Lesson 10, looking at opinion polls and how they affect Australia's democracy. Looking at some of the key players in that, whether they're actually relevant, and from there we'd be looking at those media articles that I asked everyone to collect in lesson 7. But we'd be going through those articles and categorising those into whether they have a positive or negative effect for the parties named in the article. Week 11, moving on to referendums, explaining what they are and that we need a referendum to change the constitution. I'll be getting the kids into small groups again, doing a bit of research on the web and finding out about previous referendums here in Australia. And then I'll be getting them to do an exit pass on the way out about what a referendum is and previous referendums in Australia. My final lesson would be revision, and hopefully the students will have an appreciation of the link between the Australian Constitution, our government system, and the way we act, well, as we as society participate. Now, from that, I've drafted up a quiz on Kahoot for the students to have a crack at. Hopefully that I can assess them and to see how their understanding of the topic's gone over the year. Thanks.